Welcome to Strategy Sessions by Thirsty Bandit, Episode 6, Sustainability.
Hello, everyone. This is Corey Kraychek, and I'm here with Rachel Brown for another episode of Strategy Sessions. Rach, how's it going today?
It's going, drinking wine already, so it's pretty solid start to the day.
Rachel is working on tasting notes for a client of ours, and this is the part we always joke about, right? That it's you guys sit around and drink wine all day, and we always say, well, not really, but
But some days we
there
do.
are some days that you sit around and drink wine all day. Um,
Today's that day.
Today is that day. So today
Hmm.
is a liquid strategy sessions, at least on Rachel's front. But we have a special guest with us, Shawn Hogan, who is the sustainability coordinator at Revision, is with us. Shawn, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. Doing well. Not as well as Rachel, but hopefully one day soon.
No one is. No one is. It's okay.
It's the dream, Rach. It's the dream.
It is.
But Shawn works for a consulting and architectural firm that specializes in sustainability, green builds, etc. And I had the pleasure of meeting Revision a few years ago in their principal on a project I had been working on, and so we've stayed in touch, and I'm a big fan of a lot of their work. But without stealing your thunder, Shawn, why don't you share a little bit about what Revision does and what you do at the firm?
Sure. So Revision, as you mentioned, is a sustainable architecture and consulting firm. So we're kind of split into two businesses. One is the architecture side, and they're doing exclusively sustainable and green architecture projects over there. And then the other is the sustainability consulting side. And so we do a lot of LEED consulting. So the LEED rating system, probably the most popular green building rating system out there. But we do, well is another one, living building challenge. And then I also have the pleasure of doing more social impact framework consulting as well. So B Corp and Just are kind of my bread and butter over there. But I'm both in the sustainable building rating systems world and the social impact and like business impact frameworks as well. So I get to kind of live in two lands, which is nice.
And I find this really fascinating because, and I'm sure the team at Revision hates to be pigeonholed into, well, you guys just build buildings. But the reality is when you are building a tangible physical structure, a lot of the design elements are rooted within an organization's mission, vision, what their value proposition is to the world, essentially. And so I think just by nature, when you create a firm like yours that is you're championing these efforts, these sustainability efforts, that I think it's a natural extension to start becoming more of a consultant for organizations that aspire to possess these things. And so it's really neat to me that you do both, but it's also a very logical extension, I feel like, when you're yeah, and it's terrible that we say it's still a niche industry because the reality is it shouldn't be the niche. But I think it's really cool that you guys are able to work with clients to address both sides of the coin. And as timing would have it, I don't know if you've seen, but the print edition of Fast Company for the summer, I actually just posted about this on our LinkedIn profiles and our Instagram handles, did quite a bit in conscious or stakeholder capitalism, and covering issues of sustainability and corporate transparency. And so, as luck would have it, we're having this talk today. It was not planned based upon anything I had read prior to, but the word on the street these days, at least under the current political landscape,
Hmm.
is that it's been devalued. It's lost a little bit of momentum. And while this particular podcast, we're going to try to talk about sustainability, we are going to dip into some of that corporate transparency piece too, corporate transparency piece too. And I think that it's all intrinsic. As I kind of said from the outset, Revision, has this mission, and this mission now is transcending in the physical builds and going into an organizational development level. But can you speak of how you've seen it? How these issues, whether it's environmental impact, social responsibility, employee experience, are sort of integrated with the organizations, the clients that you work with?
Yeah, wow, there's so much that you just said that I am tempted to respond to, but I'll try to answer your question as directly as possible. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that in order to build a green building or to have a client, especially a commercial or corporate client, interested in an energy efficient building or a building that's meeting LEED or Living Building Challenge, someone has to make that decision. Someone has to be motivated in some way to spend that likely extra upfront cost in the beginning. And oftentimes corporate actors are influenced by maybe there's tax credits, maybe their consumer is pushing them, or employees are pushing them in one way or another. And however, those decision makers may land into a decision that to do something more sustainably or to integrate more equitable, socially responsible business practices into the everyday of their business. However they may arrive there, I think we're ready to catch them and work with them and push them a little bit further wherever possible. Um, and I think especially in the industry that you all are in, there's so much opportunity because there are, if you think about differentiators, I think that the kind of wine and food industry is one of the most like ripe places to differentiate yourself with a socially responsible or sustainable branding that is real and transparent, right? That has a third party behind it validating that it's true and not just greenwashing. Um, and just in the way that all these issues are woven in together, I think for a long time sustainability, especially when it first kind of started to enter the for-profit world, was really just focused on saving energy, saving water, and kind of stopped there. And obviously that's still crucially important. Oh, and I forgot recycling as well. Recycling and anti-littering. It's kind of like early environmentalism. Um, but sadly, I think it took until a more recent, movement and push in the sustainability world where we started to ask the question, sustainability for whom? Is it actually for everybody? Is it only for, big corporations who, maybe can afford it, or is it only for decision makers who want to reduce their operational energy costs and their utility bills? And so I think that at this point, it is no longer it no longer makes sense to say, oh, we're just doing it for energy efficiency. You really do have to look holistically and think about who you're impacting and who the stakeholders are, even if it's not just customers, employees, and kind of directly, but who are our neighbors? Who are the people that our supply chain touches? Who are all the workers that get our product from the very beginning all the way to a shelf and to being consumed? And so this more holistic look at everything, sustainability is social responsibility. Social responsibility is sustainability at this point, I would argue.
Yeah, and the other piece of this that you touched on just briefly was that how organizations get involved in taking sustainable measures. And what we've learned from a consulting side is that if you're getting into anything for a tax credit or for the financial reasons or for the savings, it's typically not going to spell success long term. There has to be an additional desire, passion, something that's driving the initiatives forward beyond what the P&Ls are going to show because of it. And so if you don't have that, I think you're starting out with one arm tied behind your back, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I think I agree with in many cases. And on the other hand, I think that when we look at the severity of the climate crisis, when we look at water crises, when we look at the layers of human rights crises that are caused due to our global supply chains and lack of accountability and just when you look at the scale of the problem, right? I think that I'm okay with big actors at big scales being influenced by incentives and public policy. I'm totally okay with that. I don't need them to be on board in a larger way, but the business leaders and the decision makers, in this industry that are, at least from where I'm standing, very driven by interest and passion and um, you know, the few people that I know in food and wine, you get into the industry because you genuinely love it. And I think that sustainability, especially for smaller businesses, especially at tighter margins, does couldn't agree with you more. Definitely needs to come from uh, a greater desire to make this part of the business model and have it baked in from the beginning.
I think that's probably like a good transition point too, to just like the wine industry in general and what we struggle with, and bottling and waste and all this kind of excess use. And like Revision, you guys have like the B Corp and like the Just certifications and stuff. So with wineries and hospitality in general, like, can you kind of walk us through the programs and what might be a good fit for this industry and how they can kind of like take the step forward with this?
Mhm. Yeah, totally. So I'm going to start with Just because I have more to say about B Corp. So Just is a transparency label. It is a social justice transparency label for any type of organization, for profit, nonprofit, municipal, even. And it is run by Living Future, which is a really awesome organization. They run the Living Building Challenge program, which is a rating system for a really ambitious rating system for green buildings. And they run a number of transparency labels and third-party standards for building materials as well. And so Just is really focused on the people that an organization touches. So employees, community members, other stakeholders. It looks at benefits for employees. It looks at professional development, diversity and inclusion, recruitment, but also looks at community connections and the people along your supply chain. And Just is, I would say, more popular it's relatively new and more popular in the design, engineering, and construction world, just because those are typically the organizations that are maybe uh, building a living building challenge project or have a product that they're getting declare labeled. And so it's a little more focused on that industry, but I think certainly could be a really good tool for businesses who just want to see where they're at and just want like a quick assessment and to see, hey, here's a third party standard, like where do we stack up? Or if you feel like you have it down sustainability wise and you feel really good about maybe like some circular economy, like waste reduction stuff that you've done, and you want to better understand, hey, am I treating my people the way that they need to be treated? Am I treating my nearby community the way that they need to be treated? Just would be a really good, I think, starting point for like that type of business. B Corp, on the other hand, is the most recognizable third-party impact business standard out there. I would say like along the lines of like fair trade. B Corp, that's Patagonia, that's Tony's Chocolonely, that's Ben and Jerry's. Some of the even the biggest B Corp internationally is Danone. A lot of like big food companies are B Corps, and I feel like it's a really well-fitting industry for the B Corp standard. So B Corp does have a threshold for achievement, whereas it's just a transparency label. Wherever you stand, you could theoretically publish that if you wanted to. Uh, B Corp, on the other hand, there are requirements to meet. We're actually in between standards right now, and the current standards, it's an 80-point threshold. On the new standards, there are going to be universal requirements for all B Corps, and it's structured a bit differently. But there's about 9,800 B Corps internationally. There are countries and states and municipalities that have adopted policy that works with B Corp. So, either whether it's incentives or preferred purchasing with the B Corp standard, there's a legal entity that was created to kind of work with B Corp called a benefit corporation in a lot of states. So the kind of theory of change of B Corp is to um, focus on for-profit businesses, but use the requirements for those for-profit businesses to become a B Corp to create networks and interface with all of their different kinds of sectors. So whether it be the public sector, in local and state governments, academia, and obviously customers more broadly, and experts, scientists, et cetera. And it's definitely a bit more rigorous process. But once you become a B Corp, you have access to this giant network and sometimes it's organizations who you could partner with in a branding capacity, or that you could partner with in a supply chain capacity, or you can learn from. Um, and then you get to put the B Corp logo on your products. And I know when I'm shopping for something that maybe I don't have like a specific preference, and that's why I think wine and food is such a good industry for B Corp, is I've literally gone to buy wine and decided between two options because one of them had a B Corp label. And I feel like wine is because I work in doing B Corp consulting, so people will tell me, "Oh, I saw the B somewhere and I bought it because of you," and I remember this, and I kind of feel like wine and beer are the place that it comes up the most. But so that's kind of the like marketing network, how influential is B Corp side. On the operational side, these are some of the best practices that have been honed in over many years with industry experts, with scientists, with social researchers all over the world over long periods of time. These new standards that are going to be in effect in 2026, I think they started the development of them in 2018 or 2019, based off of research, but also B Corp's been around since 2007. Revision actually was a founding B Corp, fun fact. And these new standards are that many years of learning plus all this new kind of research and input from um, experts, right? So it's not only this huge kind of marketing benefit, but also instructions for here's what good looks like, here's what ambitious good looks like, here's what cutting edge being the best for the world looks like. And so I think it's and any company can open up an account on the B Impact assessment and see where they're at, and kind of evaluate themselves before targeting certification. But it touches every part of your business, everything from governance to how you interface with the public sector. Have you advocated on behalf of a regulation in your industry that would have a social or environmental benefit, all the way to do you have a direct line of communication to all of your employees where they can communicate back with you? Do you have a minimum wage that makes sense as a living wage for your area? So these are I think that's the kind of general B Corp situation there.
Yeah, in both instances, I love how they can both be so introspective and provide a toolkit to either assist with businesses that are looking to establish themselves in this manner, or um, businesses that are looking to just do better, just be better. And you can get as deep into it as you possibly want, or you can take assessments and decide what you need to work on and chip away at it slowly. And so that I think is a great thing. I know B Corp is a lot more stringent once you start getting into the certification side of things. But just allows for um, I think some looser practices and some emphasis to be in certain areas, and then acknowledging that you're a work in progress in others,
Mhm.
right? So in both instances, I think that whether it is a product differentiation piece or a guidelines and parameters for corporate organizational governance, I, there are benefits. There's a multitude of benefits that come from
Mhm.
each of them to pursue each of them. So we definitely encourage clients to take a look at both, kick the tires on both to see if one or the other may fit in what their goals are. Let's pivot a little bit and let's talk a little bit about the building practices side of things, because we deal a lot with physical, tangible tasting rooms, bottle shops, production facilities. Sometimes they're all housed in the same space, sometimes they're not. Can you share some of the projects or maybe a case study or two that Revision's worked on that you think would, translate well in food and bev or retail? I know you guys have done quite a few food and retail projects. Any of them jump to front of mind for you?
Yeah, there are three on the architecture side. So these are not, unfortunately, not products that I've worked on personally, but have heard a lot about and had some experience in. One is the sadly no longer is United by Blue, but United by Blue is a Philly-based business, actually also a B Corp, that had a cafe that Revision designed, and that ended up being lead, I think, gold or higher. I'm not sure where that landed lead wise. But they implemented low flow fixtures, so a lot of water conservation, used a ton of natural materials. The inside really, it was an outdoor brand, and so the interiors really felt like you were outside. There's like a little hut in there that really kind of brought that vibe. Um, so yeah, United by Blue is one for sure. And then we've also worked on two, or I think three actually, but one of them's more recent that I can say a little bit about. Um, Kind of like boutique grocers. So we've worked on South Philly Food Co-op, Mariposa Food Co-op in West Philly, and Weaver's Way in Germantown, Philadelphia, and all are really community focused grocers. And I know there's a lot of focus in those projects on energy efficiency. Obviously, these are groceries tend to have pretty tight margins, so you want to be thoughtful on long-term operational costs as best as possible. Um, and so a lot of thoughtfulness went into the energy efficiency of these buildings, making sure they have as tight envelopes as possible. And I think all of them were actually adaptive reuse. So these were existing buildings that were renovated into what they are today. A lot of thoughtfulness about refrigeration, and I think where possible using lower greenhouse gas refrigerants. Refrigerants, actually, fun fact, are really, really, they're better at creating a greenhouse effect and contributing to climate change than carbon dioxide, sometimes by a factor of like 400.
Wow.
So refrigerants are a huge opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And as an industry, we don't have a great way of quantifying that right now. So the best you can do to ensure there's no refrigerant leakage, use low greenhouse gas potential refrigerants where you can, and being efficient with like where you place refrigerators and refrigeration to just make sure, hey, we're bringing the temperature down as it gets closer to where the refrigerators are, so they don't have to work super hard. I think that's simple-ish stuff that the benefits of both environmentally and operational cost-wise can be really big depending on what scale you're working on. And then when we think about tasting rooms and the experience of either people moving through a retail space or going through a tasting, thinking about daylight and how we're best using daylight has both benefits to the experience of the space, and you can really use daylight to create a particular experience. Making sure there's not like glare in people's eyes at times of day where you're likely to have tastings, but also being thoughtful about using like putting your windows on the right side of the building, or using clerestory windows to bring in some kind of diffused light from the top. It can make it so you don't have to use overhead lights, and you can reduce your energy usage lighting wise, but also create like a nice atmosphere for guest experience. And then I think with anywhere where there's kitchens, I'm working on another project for sustainability consulting for lead consulting. That's a dining hall at a private school, and we had a really interesting conversation about electrification in commercial food spaces. Right now, we can move a building's heating load to electric. It's becoming a more standard practice, and we essentially one of the big tasks on the path to decarbonizing and addressing climate change at scale is going to be moving away from natural gas, and moving towards fully electrified buildings. And so that's a little easier to do where you're just kind of moving the heating over, especially in climates that maybe don't need as much heating, but can be a little harder when we think about, oh, I really like my gas stove, or oh, we need gas for particular cooking activities. And in this process where we're really discussing the potentials of electrification in this commercial kitchen, we learned a lot about induction technology. And it sounds like we're really getting to the point where a fully electrified commercial kitchen is becoming not just possible, but on its way to becoming a better experience for chefs, which is really interesting, and I think something that might be interesting to your listeners, and can be a really big, if you categorically don't need to bring gas into a building, that is a huge that shifts our full utility systems. So that's definitely a big bang strategy, I would say.
We've done some tasting programs with commercial kitchen suppliers over the last couple of years, where we've served wine or have talked about the local wine industry to designers who do layouts, and I've seen firsthand how the induction technology has progressed. And for most professionally trained chefs, they are definitely, no pun intended, warming up to the
Yeah.
idea of having induction cooktops in place of gas. So I think you're absolutely right there. And so many of our clients integrate food in to tasting rooms and wine spaces, that they will have to make some of these decisions if they build out commercial kitchens in order to support their needs. So that's been great. That's great recommendations there.
And I also wanted to mention, I forgot to talk about waste, because that's a big aspect here too. Any opportunities to compost, if it doesn't exist municipally, sometimes there's local businesses that'll take compost. And I think reaching out to our networks and finding places to send old wine bottles, and try to reuse as much that is left over after a tasting, or left over after a particular experience as possible. There's a really amazing company here in Philly called Remark Glass that makes cups out of old wine bottles. So I know they have some partnerships with local wine, in Philadelphia. So anything to create those intra-company and kind of network circular economies, I think is incredible, and has a huge impact.
Yeah, and a lot of these things, they require effort, right? Like you need to be committed to this. You need to
Mhm.
put the time, the resources, the education, and like the financial resources behind it to make these changes. So if there is an organization that is beginning this kind of process, what do you think some of the first steps that they should be taking are to commit themselves to more sustainable practices within their business?
Yeah, I think while we're certainly not at the point that I would like us to be as a society with general sustainability, there are very few places in which you would be the first to start this path. And so I think the first step I would recommend for any small business really in any industry is to find organizations that are talking about sustainability in your industry, find other similar companies to you that have tried things, and just say, hey, here's like how my business operates. How does your business operate? Where have you found success? Where have you had struggles? I think expanding our scope of like who can be part of our sustainability journey and help us with it is, super important. You can always, your waste could be someone else's supply chain, right? And so I think the opportunities start to present themselves when you start just showing up to things and asking questions and talking about what you're struggling with. So that would be my first step. I think both the B Impact Assessment and Just 3.0 are totally free and accessible to read, or even in the case of the B Impact Assessment, you can start clicking things in a free assessment and say, yeah, we do that. No, we don't do that. What does that mean? You can start doing that for free tomorrow. I also really like the Small Business Carbon Calculator from the SME Climate Hub. That's a good first pass on, hey, what are your utility bills typically? What are some other parts of your supply chain? And it'll just spit out, hey, here's roughly what your scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions are as a business, and maybe help you identify some places for improvement. I also think, especially if cost is a concern, a lot of municipalities and states, at least for now, still have, if you call the, local municipality or maybe your local utility company and say, hey, I'm a small business. I use roughly like this much energy wise. Can you send someone out to just like look at the building and tell me where I can make improvements? I know Pico here in Philly does that for free. And there's a lot of like rebate programs to replace equipment. Um, any aging equipment's going to be a draw on energy consumption for sure. And so thinking about those capital investments and what kind of opportunities may exist, either nonprofits, municipal level, state level, to, replace those and get some money back, get some rebates, maybe get, there's a zero interest loan. Like a lot of those programs exist out there in different places. And yeah, those are, I would say, some like easy kind of, not easy, but like first couple of things to do. And maybe once you start to see the savings of replacing some old equipment, or reducing your energy consumption, then you can think about some of the bigger items to tackle, whether it's creating more of a circular economy for the materials coming in and out, or pursuing, a B Corp or a Just or something like that.
Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming to try to take it all in at once. So little baby steps along the way to build to a larger strategy is always something that's worth taking a look at, and maybe will not be a direct impact or a major capital expense to get things going. Shawn, thank you so much for taking a few minutes today. I know how passionate you are and how passionate Revision is about these topics. And we could spend a much longer time talking about them and talking about some of the successes that we've seen within the wine industry and the hospitality industry just through our general comings and goings. But our podcast time is at an end at this point. We really appreciate you coming on with us and sharing your expertise. And for those of you looking for more information, we'll drop some links onto some of our posts on how people can access B Corp, Just some of the resources that we referenced in this podcast. So thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time. Hello, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Strategy Sessions by Thirsty Bandit. We hope to see you next time.